This morning is a continuation of great tradition that I've been doing for my entire time in public service, and to hear from constituents and try and be responsive. Town hall meetings I've had since I was in the State House, and definitely wanted to continue when I got to the Capitol and started working and representing Front Royal. So we've had them in Front Royal before COVID. After COVID started hit, we switched to teletown halls. Some of you may have gotten contacted by the office about teletown hall meetings. Those are frustrating to me because you can't see folks face to face and talk to them about the issues, hear what's important to them. But now that COVID is an issue that we are managing, even though it's still a pandemic, we wanted to get back to in-person town halls and give folks an opportunity to talk about what's important to them. This is a pretty freewheeling town hall. You know, I don't try and limit it to one topic or another. We've had those on the teletown halls with healthcare when COVID hit. We've had, but what we've found is that it's best when we leave it wide open so I can hear from you. This time of day is a challenge for some, but it's the only time for others to be able to make town hall meetings. And when we first started town halls, we did them always in the evening, only in the evening. And what we found was there are people who work odd hours or late shifts or second shifts who can't do it. So my wife was the one who suggested, because she's not only an attorney, but she has to help, well, she does it really. I mean, she raises our twin daughters and has to get them off to school in the morning, and then pick them up and take them to practice and everything else in the evening. And so she told me, she said, the only time I can do a town hall meeting is at lunch. So you got to make sure you do some at lunch. So I said, all right, then we're going to rotate them in a very strict order from morning, noon till night. Morning, noon till night. So the last one I had in Front Royal pre-COVID was evening. So that's why you're here so early. But I appreciate you coming out, and the next one will be at lunchtime. A lot of these have been in the morning here lately. I think we just had a batch of them that hadn't been done, that the last one was in the evening. So several of them have been in the morning. I've been riding on coffee at a lot of these for several weeks now. Since the election, we started ramping them back up again, and I'm thinking about changing the name to Coffee with Your Congressman, because hopefully everybody's getting coffee. I've got coffee, and it's right back there, so help yourself. And I've got a colleague who does them in the evening, calls them Cocktails with Your Congressman. We're not there yet. We've got a ways to go before we're going to be having cocktails with your congressman. But I appreciate everybody's patience and everybody's good humor this morning. I do want to start with a moment of silence, because on the way here you may have had some challenges getting here, because they are bringing back the body of Jesse Dove, who was a local deputy who died here recently, and there are a number of law enforcement vehicles who have come out to support him and support his family, and it's always tragic when we lose a member of law enforcement. So if we could start off with a moment of silence for the memory of Jesse Dove, and we'll just stand, and if you would, just join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Well, it's a busy time of year. Most of the time when we have these town halls, we're in the middle of a session, we've got pending legislation, and usually it revolves around the budget, the appropriations process, something looming on the horizon, whether it's a shutdown or a big bill that's coming. And with the passing of the election and upcoming session coming, I was thinking there might be a chance to be forward-looking and talk about what we'd like to see from the next Congress. But there's still a lot to be done in this Congress. This Congress is frustratingly gridlocked and has not been able to get any of their appropriations bills done. So there are conversations about what to do because the government is, again, faced with the looming shutdown here in about 2 weeks. And we need to, at the very least, pass a continuing resolution to keep the government running. But just kicking the can down the road is unacceptable. And while I would prefer pushing it off till the next Congress, instead of passing a larger omnibus budget bill, I think conversations are happening about both. It's been very frustrating, especially since I got appointed to the Appropriations Committee, to be faced with this kind of lurching, ineffective process that really doesn't serve the people or the government very well. And so what we've seen over the last 4 years that I've been in, and many years before that, is brinksmanship and a failure to work together to get things accomplished. So one of the things that I've found useful is trying to work with the other side to try and discuss ways to get things done. I'm in a group called the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is a caucus of equal number of Republicans and Democrats. We work together to try and advance an agenda that gets Congress back on track and moving in the right direction for the people. We're going to have to work together because the results of this election are that the Republicans are in control of the House of Representatives next year. The Democrats are in control of the U.S. Senate next year. So, working with the White House, and I've had bills signed into law working with Democrats under Trump and under Biden, that will require us to work together. And that's not easy with social media being what it is, cable media being what it is, always looking for ways to push us apart and ignore the progress that's necessary, ignore the cooperation that's necessary to solve the problems that are facing our communities. You can talk about, and there are many problems. I think if you look at and talk to folks, and I've been talking to folks all fall during the campaign, the economy and inflation was the #1 issue folks brought up. And you don't have to go anywhere but the grocery store or the gas station to see how prices have gone up. And when you talk to them, they say, well, wages haven't kept pace. So we've got issues there that stems from, and the solution to which is largely based on energy. We've got a need for prices to come down on energy, prices at the pump. If you talk to farmers, inflation's up at around 7%, but farmers' input costs aren't up 7%, they're up more like 40%. If you talk to them about their fertilizer prices, if you talk to them about their fuel costs, and they run on diesel, which is still higher than unleaded, they're going to say that their prices are stuck at a place that is making it nearly impossible for them to make ends meet. And if you talk to manufacturers, labor is a huge issue, but again, energy prices, the electric bill, the price of fuel, their ability to get things accomplished, get their second shift staffed, third shift staffed, if they can get one set up, makes them less competitive, not just domestically, but around the world when we have this inflation pushing down on us. And it's a global issue, so inflation is everywhere, which is why it's so necessary. There are solutions, and the main solution is that we need to bring down energy costs that filter through the entire economy. So you in your house with your electric bill, the business down the street, the farmer trying to make ends meet, all can be helped by bringing down energy costs. And how do you bring down energy costs? Well, the best way is to increase production. You increase supply and prices will fall. But in a global market, that's a lot of supply. To impact the markets, you have to actually produce a great deal. And we have been producing a lot, but we can produce more, and we need to produce more. And so one of the things we have to do is to reach an understanding with the Senate and the administration that we have to up our production. Now, production levels are where they have been at pretty high levels over the past several years, but they need to go higher. So we need to not just be approving leases on federal land, but approving more leases on federal land for oil, for natural gas. We need to be, because those are the most productive way to get the supply we need to bring down prices. We need to revamp our nuclear industry in this country. Nuclear is cleaner, it's safer, and can meet the needs more effectively than even coal or natural gas, which are getting cleaner and getting, natural gas is cleaner than coal, but we have clean coal technology now, which is enabling the safe extraction and the cleaner extraction from the ground. And we also, so we have a governor who recognizes that nuclear is a way that Virginia can take the lead. Southwest Virginia is what he has suggested should be the site for a new micro-reactor. I think that's great. If it can help bring down energy costs regionally in the state. But he's also said, and I agree with Youngkin, that we need to focus on an all of the above energy strategy. So it's fine to have solar, it's fine to have wind, but those don't produce enough energy to bring down costs like increased oil, increased natural gas, increased nuclear would do. So we're going to be pushing to restore that energy independence. And when I say energy independence, I just mean produce more than we import, because we have always imported. It's just that we've gotten so good at, whether it's slant drilling or other technologies, to increase that production level. So we've got to increase that supply, and that will help our economy, help our inflation. And so that's going to be a top priority when we start back in January. You've also got a crisis at the border. You've got essentially a failure to secure our border. Some people may disagree, but there are drugs coming across the border. There is human trafficking coming across the border. There is sex trafficking coming across the border. And it is a crisis. It's a humanitarian crisis for the people and the minors who are being trafficked across the border. I think all would agree it's a tragedy. And so we need to secure our border. Right now, we have too few Border Patrol agents who are being taken off the lines at the border and brought into processing facilities. I've been to the border twice. I've talked to CPB. They need more manpower, but even if you double, triple the number of Border Patrol agents who are working, that will only do a little to address the crisis. What they need is a disincentive for people to begin the journey back in their home country. And when you are told in your home country that, don't worry, when you get here, you'll be welcomed in, you'll be given a court date in a year or two, and released into the interior of the country, people start that journey. What they need to be told is that the border is closed, that if you are crossing the border, you'll be returned to your home country. One of the problems is that we have complex asylum laws that actually contradict each other in places and don't accurately define what is grounds for asylum. What our asylum laws were meant to provide for was if someone is being targeted for their race, for their ethnicity, for their, if there is a war going on in their country and they're being attacked for their, as part of that war for one of those categories, asylum is an option. We are welcoming victims of the war in Ukraine to this country because they are truly being attacked and forced out of the country. Record numbers of people are fleeing Ukraine because of the targeting of civilians by Vladimir Putin. So accepting and resettling Ukrainians while the war goes on is an important thing that this country is doing. Many of the people who are coming up from what you call the triangle countries are seeking a better life, are seeking a better job, are seeking more opportunities for their family. Those are not grounds for asylum in this country. If you think they should be, we can talk about ways to change our laws. But crime rates in your home country are not grounds for asylum. Drugs in your community are not grounds for asylum. So we need to make sure that the right laws are applying here at the border, and that those who are not qualifying for asylum are met at the border and either adjudicated at the border or returned to their home country while they await adjudication. I think you should be able to apply for asylum in your home country. So go to the embassy. If you want to go to the U.S. Embassy, that's a good place to apply for asylum and wait out your application. But we have to control our borders, and that's a crisis that's having an impact right here in Front Royal, right here in the Shenandoah Valley, even today. If you talk to the troopers who patrol 66, who patrol 81, they will tell you horror stories about what they find on the interstate. And it's coming from the southern border. And it's a tragedy for those involved. So the border definitely is a crisis that needs to be addressed. We also have growing crime in the valley. We have growing crime here in Front Royal. We need to make sure that our law enforcement has the resources they need. We have to make sure that we support our law enforcement officers, and that is not only a resources issue, and the federal government has a role there and can provide additional resources, but it's also an attitude issue. It's also making sure that we support our law enforcement day to day, that we don't denigrate or demean law enforcement We don't blanket attack law enforcement as somehow being against a group of people or and somehow as a profession somehow discriminatory in their application of the laws. The men and women who I meet here in Warren County, up and down the Shenandoah Valley, are our best and our brightest. They do a fantastic job, and we need to support them each and every day as they try and do their jobs. Are there bad apples? Sure. There are bad apples in every profession, and we should root out and remove those bad apples from the profession. But does it spoil the whole bunch? No. And we have to make sure that we encourage people to get into the professions. When you talk about law enforcement, their recruiting is challenging. When you talk about the military, they're not meeting their recruitment goals. And part of that is because of the lack of respect that they're being given, not just by some in government, but also some in the media, in the press, and across the country. So we've got work to do to make sure that we can address crime in our communities. I was a prosecutor for many years. Prosecution is just one part of a three-legged stool that helps to target crime. If you have a prosecutor that they need to prosecute aggressively the crimes that are committed, you have law enforcement, they need to actually perform the arrests and charge the individuals that are committing the offenses. And then you need a judge who's a tough judge who's going to sentence appropriately and make sure they're sentenced to time and not just time served or but your sentencing guidelines need to actually be strong enough to deter, and deterrence is an important part of your sentencing guidelines. And you also need to make sure that when someone is dangerous and they're brought in, they're not released. They're not released immediately. They're held awaiting trial all too often, and it's in a lot of other states, but it's increasingly in Virginia, where you have people who should be behind bars before their trial, released back into the community to commit repeat offenses. And repeat offenses are some of the reasons why our crime rates are growing. So if any one of those three legs of the stool are removed, you get a faulty system. Now, judges are, we have some of the best judges here, and they're members of the community. They've come up in the community. I served in the State House with Judge Athey, who is an old friend, and I'm not calling him old, I'm just saying he's an old friend, who I know to be a good man and is doing a good job. And part of that is because your state officials, and you've got a great group of state officials here who are working hard. You've got 3 state delegates. Warren County split 3 ways, but you've got 3 good state delegates who are doing a good job. And Virginia is one of only 2 states where the legislature appoints the judiciary. And that's a little bit strange. Usually they run for election, which I think is a terrible idea. Because the last thing you want is a judge out there running TV ads saying that he'll lock up more criminals than anybody else because each case needs to be adjudicated on the merits. But Virginia's unique, and so we have a great judiciary because of that. Prosecutors run every 4 years, and we've got great prosecutors here too. And then the law enforcement community is top-notch, and we just have to support them each and every day. So those are several issues that are confronting folks when I make my way around, and Warren County was no different than any other community in the 6th District. and I was honored to receive a majority of the vote to go back from Warren County. We've got a lot of other issues. I want to hear from you about it. I could talk all day, but you guys have the issues that you want us to address in the next Congress. You think are important to you, your families, your jobs, your community, and so I want to hear about them. And I don't just want to hear, from the 70% that voted for me. I want to hear from the 30% who voted against me, and because I want to represent everybody. So if you didn't vote for me, that's fine. I can definitely. I want to hear from you because we have a great system, and the situation that we have with my offices is we want to hear every way possible to connect with me. We want to hear from you, whether it's in person today. My staff is here to hear from you. We get emails, we get phone calls, we get contacted at what we call when staff come out to have staff mobile office hours to hear from you about casework. And that's another thing. The legislative agenda that we have is important, but equally important is the job that we do dealing one-on-one with you with issues of concern. If you have a case with the VA, if you have a case with Social Security Administration, Postal Service, we have constituent service representatives up and down the valley who know what they're doing, who are the best at what they do. My office in Harrisonburg serves Warren County, and I have 2 full-time and 1 part-time staff there. My district director works in Stanton, and then we have 2 full-time and 2 part-time in Roanoke. I have a Lynchburg office that's closing, and because of redistricting, I have a Winchester office that will be opening, and we're still talking about how we're going to readjust and which community, how we're going to serve Warren best. So if you have suggestions on whether Warren should be served by Winchester or Warren should be served by the Harrisonburg office, what's easier for y'all to get to? That's good to know, because sometimes it's going to take a meeting in my Harrisonburg or my district office to get things done. But the stories that come from our casework are some of the best stories that we have. The people who, it's as small as a passport renewal, that somebody's daughter was getting married and they scheduled a wedding overseas and didn't realize their passport wasn't renewed. And if I can call somebody in the State Department and get it renewed in a week, then they can make their daughter's wedding, and that's something that I'm particularly proud of, being able to cut through red tape for constituents. So we have a lot of the same staff that Bob Goodlatte had when he was representing this area. As was told to me earlier, Frank Wolf got to represent Warren County for many years when he was in the 10th. And when I worked for Bob Goodlatte, I got to know Congressman Wolf, and he's been here in the Valley recently, and it was great to catch up with him. But you all have had strong constituent service over the years. I mean to continue that. So any suggestions or criticisms are welcome. I'm always looking to improve, always looking to make the system work better. So moving forward, thank you all for being here. The way that we operate, I think everybody here is from Warren. That's why you're wearing green stickers. If you're sometimes we have split communities where we have cities and counties, and we have 2 town hall meetings, one in the city and one in the county, because the issues are different in in each community. So, like I said, I've had town halls in every community, and we like to hear from them. But if you're, and it looks like everybody's got a green sticker. Yes. So happy to hear from you with green stickers first, and if anybody doesn't have a green sticker, is from outside the community, then definitely want to have have you speak as well, but we'll probably go through everybody else first. All right, so with that, who has a question first? And then I'm going to start with this gentleman because he has his hand up first, and then I'll go to you, man.
Thank you, Mr. Cline. First of all, as when I come in, I congratulate you on your win, even though I did not vote for you. I like you. I had high hopes for you, and I still have high hopes for you. And I'm glad that you're our representative and that we can talk to you. I'm an American, I'm a veteran, and I'm a resident of Warren County. And yet, because of people in politics and the media, all stations are splitting us up as if we're Taliban, Marxists, communists, just because you express an idea that's different from theirs. And I think that we need to open our eyes while we can and fight together, not at each other. My neighbor at the end of my block is from a strong representative of a different party all his life. He's got all his signs and flags out, and we share vegetables. We talk. We're both veterans. We go to the same VA for health care. And that's the way it should be, not the way it is. And I expect people in Congress to be the leaders and set the pattern. You don't send your daughters to school and say, look for the lowest common denominator jerk in the class and follow him or her. You suggest follow those people who are successful and are respectful and are learning and are a good example. And unfortunately, what I see in Congress, and I'm delighted to hear that you're part of a caucus, is people behaving like high school children or middle school children. I'd like to see more adult behavior in Congress, and I hope that you use whatever influence you have. I know it's a tough row to hoe because one of the major jerks in there is the biggest fundraiser and has great applause, but it has produced nothing except money to get people reelected. So that's one thing. That's my emotional output. The second thing is, I also would like to let you know, to my surprise, as I walked through and I canvassed for your opponent, is I walked into and spoke to one woman, and I said, well, what has Ben Cline done for you? Tell me how he's done something for Warren County. And she broke into tears and said, he helped my son, who has a law enforcement problem. So I just want to let you know that you're not all bad. You're doing good things too. Here's the issues that I see. I work at a food pantry at our church every month and sometimes several times a month. I pick up food at the Winchester Food Bank, which is well run, very, very well done, except things are being cut off now. Wherever they're getting their sources isn't coming. For Thanksgiving, we were able to get 3-pound blocks of purple frozen ham with water added, and that's supposed to be our Thanksgiving meal for people. And we ended up doing another shuffle and we're able to get somebody to donate money. So I think those things need people's attention, whoever is in the line, to look into, to see if something could be done to move around resources. The second thing is, and I don't know how the hell that you get around and you solve this, but seniors are a target. Every day, I'll get a phone call saying, oh, your Comcast account is, you need to do this and that and so forth, or your Medicare, or this. I mean, isn't there a way that Congress can start doing something about approaching this to shut these people down? Talk about crime. Talk about people being devastated. I mean, I live on Social Security and a little bit of savings. I've been retired 26 years, and the little drain, the little tank is running out, so I have to be careful with my money. And I'm not complaining. I live a good life, is I love living here. And I eat like a pig, and I have everything I want. And with the gas prices dropping, I can even not feel as much pain because I don't have to drive to Washington. I'm just driving to the grocery store, or the library, or the VA, or taking my wife to the doctor, or taking me to the doctor. You know, I mean, you drive a lot. I mean, we use a lot of resources. So anyway, I think that's about what I have to say, but let's put some respect in Congress. Thank you.
I appreciate it. I'm sorry, I meant to ask you to introduce yourself when you...
I'm John Cernak from Shenandoah.
Great. Well, thank you for being here and for sharing your concern. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Sometimes the squeakiest wheel up there gets the attention from the media, if you want to call that grease. And I campaigned back in 18 on a quote from Benjamin Franklin, well done is better than well said. And for even those of us who aren't that eloquent, I'd rather be a workhorse than a show horse, and Congress has its share of show horses. It's a kind way to put it. Those who would light their hair on fire or push their mother out of the way to get in front of a TV camera is a less kind way to put it. My predecessor was also one who worked to try and get things done. You may not have agreed with him all the time, but he was always, as an attorney, you're trained to anticipate the other side, to kind of think about what the other side is thinking and what the other side is trying to accomplish and respond. And so, as an attorney and as a former prosecutor and a former defense attorney afterward, I've grown used to that. And so my friends on the other side of the aisle, I do my best to put myself in not just their shoes, but the shoes of their constituents, and try and find ways we can work together. We're not going to agree on everything, but you can disagree without being disagreeable, and I try and accomplish that. I've told this story, and I've been mocked by some for talking about eating lunch, but in Richmond, I learned many ways that things can get done, and one of the ways that helps to break down barriers is to get to know a person. And when we're in Richmond, the session starts at noon every day, and they have lunch in the back, and there's only one room for lunch. It's a line that everybody gets in, so you're Republican, Democrat, and then you sit there in the back lounge and eat together. And some of the most liberal and most conservative are in line together, and you really just have to making small talk goes a long way, and you don't talk about bills, you talk about your families and your jobs and because we're a part-time legislature in Richmond, and you talk about your challenges in your communities. If there's a storm or something going on, you talk about that. And so then when you go to your committees or when you stand up on the floor to debate an issue, you actually are looking at someone who you know more about, who you've broken bread with and who you've shared a conversation with. In Washington, there are two separate lounges behind the floor, one for Republicans and one for Democrats. And Republicans go back to their lounge and Democrats go back to their lounge, and there's food and conversation. Republicans never go into the Democrat lounge and Democrats never go into the Republican lounge. And even with the committees, I could break a pattern. I'd be confronted and shooed out, but sometimes you have to do that kind of thing. I did actually go in there once. It was because I wanted to ask AOC a question. I had heard a rumor that she was in the 6th district over a break, and we hadn't talked since freshman orientation, but because we're in the same class. But I wanted to confirm that rumor, and sure enough, she was at an Airbnb down in Page, and said she enjoyed it very much. But that was my one time going into the Democrat Lounge, and it was I was met with a lot of surprise and consternation on the part of the other side. But I don't stop trying to meet and to make those relationships, because that's how relationships are how things get done in Washington. And when you have, over the past 2 years, we've had total control in Washington with the other party. And before that, it was the House was controlled by the other party. So if you want to advance legislation, you've got to meet with the other side. And on Judiciary, which was the committee I was on my first term, that was one of the most partisan committees. So I would reach out to the other side, have lunches with the other side, and it paid off, because when it came time to move a small business bill, one of the subcommittee chairs, David Cicilline from Rhode Island, said, I don't have the bandwidth to do it, give it to Cline, he'll do it. And it's not a controversial issue, it's not a partisan issue, it's just an issue that needed to get done. So I had him as a partner, put my name on the bill, and it got signed into law by the president. So, that kind of relationship is what I'm all about. And the partisans can stir things up and light their hair on fire if they want, but that's not my way. It's not the way I was in Richmond. It's why I was a productive member of the General Assembly. It's not the way I'm in Washington, despite some best effort to characterize me otherwise. But I try and reassure people that I'm here to work for you, regardless of your party affiliation or your positions on the issues. I may not agree with you, but to the degree that I can help and find those areas where we can agree and work together, that's what I'm committed to do. So I appreciate that very much. Ma'am, you had a comment over here.
Yes, hello, good morning. My name is Jean Travolsi, and I live in the Rivermont district. That's the airport road.
Great.
And I echo John's remarks. I find you very affable. And thank you for being here, because your predecessor often didn't come.
Excuse me, Gene, can you speak up a little louder? I can't.
I echo John's remarks. And I'm sorry I'm late.
No.
Because I'm a school teacher,
Yes, ma'am.
2nd grade, and I didn't allow my students to be late. What I want to say is, every time I call, Emily answers the telephone. And then she comes to you and tells you that I have something to say. I want to thank you for sending my issues to the Small Business Association and to the Treasurer's Office. And I have left something with Deborah at the table, because they have not responded to you in 2 years.
Oh dear.
And I think they disrespected you, or maybe they were busy. So I'm asking you to do that
We
again.
will take action, and sometimes, and I hate that it works this way, but sometimes a call will move things.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. I had heard, and if it's still true, that you do not believe the elections of 2016. Is that still true? Could you tell me why, please?
Thank you. Question was about 2016 elections. 2016 or 2020?
2020.
And 2016.
Okay.
right? And 2016. Yeah.
2020.
Some question the elections of 2020, some questions the elections of 2016. And what I have said is that my votes on January 6th to reject the electors from Arizona and Pennsylvania relate to the laws of the states that were violated by judges or the Secretary of State in Pennsylvania, related specifically not to the voter integrity issue, but to the way in which the electors were chosen. So Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution says that the electors, it's very specific to the president, not to any other election. Electors must be chosen according to the laws of the state. Those laws are clear about when registration deadlines end,
Yes.
when early voting ends. So what you had in those two states were unelected bureaucrats or judges changing the laws unilaterally. The result of which led me and others to reject those electors. It's not unprecedented. It had happened before. And it was very tragic, the events that occurred on that day, the violence that occurred. I condemn the violence, and I support the prosecution of those responsible. But I stand by my votes because, unrelated to the election integrity issues, were those issues related specifically to the state laws. And those are not disputed at all. The individuals who changed the laws will tell you they changed the laws, and those who supported that change will say, in spite of those changes, we should have accepted the electors, and those who oppose the changes say we were right to reject them because the result is actually called into question because of those changes. So I stand by my vote. I've been very clear about it and have great detail on my website and statements that I've made about that. So I think election integrity is a problem because we have people who are not confident. We have a lack of confidence by many in our election systems now, and we have to do what we can on both sides to improve that confidence, restore that confidence of the electorate. And I think by providing more transparency in the system, by providing a simpler and effective system at the state level, because we don't have, and we shouldn't have, federally administered elections. That way we can restore that confidence and move forward. So I'm encouraging things like photo ID requirements. We had that in Virginia. We don't have that anymore. I am happy to debate whether or not that's a good law at the state level, but again, it's a state level law that I think is a reasonable standard to have. By restoring that integrity, I think both sides would agree we're going to strengthen the system and strengthen the country.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. All right, let's see. Yes, ma'am, and then I'm happy to go to you.
Okay, Nancy Smith. I'm Warren County. I'm a retired public elementary school teacher. I'm a mother of three and a grand. I've taught first grade, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh and eighth grade ESL, seventh and eighth grade language impaired.
I've got fifth graders who are teenagers in training, so I salute you for your service.
So, you did fail to mention that another issue in the November election was the fact that women's rights to choose for their own personal health care were taken away I was 16 when Roe versus Wade was passed. And for the first time, my daughter and my granddaughters have less rights than I did. And that was a key issue in the voting. And so I did want to mention that because you failed to. So on October 27th of this year, you posted on your social media, as math and reading scores declined at historic levels, it is further evidence that our kids needed to be back in the classroom sooner, not locked down by COVID restrictions. Over 22,000 Virginians have died of COVID. Without the shutdown restrictions, that number would have been much higher. COVID restrictions were about saving lives. You took office in 2019. Effective leaders are problem solvers, and they take responsibility. They don't place blame or complain. So my questions are, what have you been or are your policy proposals for closing the current learning gap? Be specific, not generalities. Then poverty played a significant role in academic declines during the pandemic. Have you or will you support efforts, programs to provide resources for these students and their families? And then how do you keep abreast of District 6 public school needs?
Thank you. Education is an important issue. It's an important issue here locally. I thank you for teaching. I thank you for teaching as well. And but it's one that's best addressed at the local level. And so the post you mentioned is, I'm going to take your word for it. I don't read social media. I do my best to stay away from it, and I think that's one way in which we try and help work together by not siloing ourselves in communities where we only listen to like-minded and only seek to have that.
Can you clarify that, because it was on your social media?
Right. So my staff and I'm going to take your word for it that the post that was drafted by my staff and that I do my best to approve all the posts. But again, I don't see the conversation that happens after that. So I did post, if I did, that's my concern about the previous governor's policies regarding the COVID shutdown. I was very concerned from the beginning that Virginia shut down too much, and as a result, our economy suffered more than other states.
But that's not my question. We are in the situation we are right now.
Okay.
As you stated, we need to move forward.
Yes.
So what's the plan for moving forward with these students? It's not just Virginia, it's not just District 6. It is a nationwide issue, concern. So what, and again, since you posted it, what's your plan? There's no point discussing what's happened. We're where we are right now. And it hits poverty. Students that already were struggling, they experienced the widest gap in
Yes.
decrease in learning in math and in reading, mostly in math.
I agree that those results are tragic, and they are worse in states that shut down more. And we have a challenge in Virginia. It is specific to Virginia because education is a local issue funded primarily by the state, but also with local funds. 5% of the funds come from the federal government. I believe that those are accompanied by far too many regulations and requirements, and simply adding more will do nothing to help address that learning curve. The resources that are provided should be at the very least block granted, and decision-making taken away from bureaucrats at the Department of Education,
What are
and
you
that
proposing?
taking away control in Washington and giving it to states and localities. That is my solution. That is a better solution than what we have now.
You've been in office 4 years.
Yes.
Under Trump and Biden.
Yes.
And so, and COVID was hit, we're coming up on 3 years ago, last March. So, I mean, we've been in this situation for over 2.5 years.
Yes.
Okay, for example,
And I've supported budgets that provide assistance to local governments for education purposes. But I am concerned that those limited funds are accompanied by way too many regulations. So if you want to get more bang for your buck, which I do, and I think you do too, get more value in your federal dollar that comes to the local government, that comes to Warren County for the school board to spend, let's take away some of those regulations on the different administrative requirements that are placed on schools, the content requirement that are placed on schools, because I think Warren County parents, teachers, and parents, teachers, and administrators and school boards know best how to teach Warren County kids than Washington, D.C. Bureaucrats or elected officials.
but you see, you made this, well, you're saying your staff
I stand
did.
by it.
You made this comment,
Yes.
and I do attend Warren County School Board meetings. I try
Good.
each month, so I can stay abreast, because once you're an educator, you're always one. And so to post this, be a problem solver. What specifically, you said take away purse strings. Well, okay, what? How is that going to benefit our students, our families?
Ask the school board if they would like to have less control from Washington over the money that's provided. And I think you'll get university, well, you ask for my.
Have you, not with school boards, have you suggested some summer school programs, or, because they need to, students that are struggling need to have even more,
Well, requiring a summer school program would be a federal regulation that I think they should decide whether or not they have summer school programs. Education is not
well,
a federal.
I'll be honest, I do follow your posts, and the majority of them are complaining. They're not problem solving. You speak in generalities, and I feel like you're doing that again. You're speaking in generalities. You make, you state this, and this is just one example, and yet, okay, what have you done? You've been in office 4 years. We've been in COVID, again, 3 years. Purse strings, okay, that's like,
Well, you can talk about the votes that I've taken to help provide assistance to local school divisions to address the COVID crisis. You can talk about the bills I've passed to help small businesses in Warren County to survive so that the employees can get paid and make sure that there's food on the table for the kids going to school. There's a job for the parents. There are a number of things that I have supported and voted for. I do have concerns. I do express them on social media. I oppose this administration on a lot of things. I oppose Nancy Pelosi's leadership on a lot of things. I will be very glad when she is not speaker in January.
you state you're a unifier.
Yes.
And yet your posts, the divisive rhetoric that is constant
It's
on
always
there.
policy-based. It's always
No, it is
policy-based.
not.
So,
I'm tired of it, and I don't think I speak just for myself. As John said, I'm tired of the divisiveness and the hateful rhetoric. Be a problem solver.
that's what I am. That's why I'm in the Congress.
Well, you need to read your posts and then tell me. They're constantly just blaming, pointing the finger the other way.
My social media is definitely to bring awareness to my work, and so you'll see a lot of posts about my efforts in the community, having town hall meetings, but I will also make sure to point out what's going through Congress right now. I hope everybody subscribes to my newsletter, which is designed to talk about the issues that occur over the week, where I am, who I'm talking to, who I'm meeting with, and the issues that we're covering. And often the issues are divisive. and issues can be divisive, but we have to try to work together to reach agreement on those issues. And if I point out a difference with the Pelosi speakership or the Biden administration, it's with the intent to represent my constituents and make sure that their views are heard. And often when I express those views, they're counter to the views of the speaker, the leadership, or the president. So I'll continue to do that because I think that's important.
Well, why not, for example, call out the recent dinner that Trump held with Kanye West and Nick Fuentes, and I have called your office and asked why you've not addressed that, the anti-Semitism, because your silence is complicity. Your silence is condoning.
I have.
On your Facebook?
On my
No.
social media page?
Where should I look for it? Because a lot of people do follow. Where, I've called and
I've
asked.
said many times, everybody should condemn racism. Everybody should condemn
hear that.
anti-Semitism, religious bigotry. I condemn it, and violence affiliated with it, or that those who traffic in it commit. So I'll continue to do that. Yes, sir. Well, let me see. Wait a minute. I wanted to go to you next, and then I'll come back to you. And
My name is Steve Schwab. I live in Apple Mountain West. I don't like to complain without being able to offer a solution. So I listened to you talk about the lack of manpower on the southern border. There are a lot of issues that bother me nationally these days. During the pandemic, when they sent financial relief out to everybody, they sent it to everybody. And I would, looking around, I would suspect that most of the people in this room and many of the people in this county didn't need a penny. I get tired of federal programs that throw money at problems. When I hear about the current administration wants to give everybody a free associate's degree, community college education. I have a master's degree in aeronautical engineering, and I'll tell you how I got it. 80% of it was paid for by the government. But I paid for it with my service. I spent 6 years in the Army and 17 and a half years in the Navy. And during that time, I was able to do my undergraduate work and my graduate work, and the military paid for 80% of it.
where'd you go to school?
Embry-Riddle. But my point is this. I'm tired of people sticking their hand out and saying, bail me out. I'm tired of people signing a contract and saying, I will pay you back X number of dollars, and then looking for the government to bail them out. Okay. When I served in Vietnam, 2/3 of the people around me were draftees. And although they didn't want to be there, I will tell you, looking back, they were all better off for being there. I grew up in a community that was all white and all Christian. And until I went to the military, I wasn't exposed to anybody but white Christians. And it was my time in the military that got me very comfortable mixing with other minorities and ethnicities that exist in this country. And I think that that's a big part of what's missing. If you want to put more people on the border, you want more people to fight fires out west, and you want people that can react to disaster relief immediately, require 2 years of federal service from every member of this society. Well, thank you. Thank you. And you know, I get Americans are getting so, now, I'm old and I'm fat, but I haven't always been like this. But this country is getting old and fat, and the amount of hate and vitriol that I see boiling to the surface is all a result of people living in their little tribes and not being exposed to others. And when I look at the flag, people talk about burning the flag and not burning the flag or whatever. When I look at the flag, I feel a sense of ownership. But that ownership comes from serving. Young people today don't serve it, and it doesn't mean anything to them. They wear clothing that has it all over, but it really doesn't mean anything to them. And I think requiring national service is a way of solving many of our problems. And the way we've been solving our problems, both Democrats and Republicans, is ridiculous. You know, if you go back to Katrina, after Katrina, it was a Republican administration that gave every refugee of that storm a cash card with $5,000 on it, and they gave them a trailer to live in. The problem with that is if you give poor people a card with $5,000, they're not going to go out and reclothe themselves and feed them. They're going to buy a flat screen color TV. And if you go back and look, that's exactly what they did. As soon as they issued those cards, you couldn't buy a flat screen TV within 200 miles of New Orleans. And then once those people were rehomed, you had all of those useless trailers sitting around. Now, if you go back, we also started closing down military bases. And we sold those off at pennies on the dollar. And real estate companies, if you go up to Chicago and go to, now I forget what it was called.
Was it Great Lakes?
No, not Great Lakes, the air station. The Naval Air Station up there is now a suburban community, okay? And the realtors made tons of money on those. But if you think about it, every military base that you shut down and sell off has feeding facilities, housing facilities, administrative facilities, and you've got a military that can pick the refugees up, take them there. You can bring vocational rehabilitation counselors and other people that can relocate them, re-educate them, or get them back where they need to be at minimal cost. But instead, we take these resources and we sell them off. And what do we get? In the grand scheme of things, we get nothing. Okay, it does nothing for us, and it just helps the business community. And I'm tired of Americans wanting something for nothing. I have never taken any kind of handout in my life. I'm 71 years old. Okay, I prepared for retirement properly. I also, you know, it never ceases to amaze me how much conventional wisdom floats around, and nobody pays attention to it. You know, I constantly hear from financial advisors that you should have 6 months of cash on hand. Okay. Well, I've always done that, and I've never had a problem. As a matter of fact, what I said was if we should have 6 months, then a year would probably be good, and that's what I put together. But how many Americans do that? You know, we have, but let me tell you that in Congress, you don't do it either. Because for years, for decades, scientists went to Congress and said, the earth is heating up, we're going to have climate change, and you better do something about it, or it's going to get a hell of a lot worse. And what Congress said, and I don't care whether they were Republicans or Democrats, what our legislators said was, I need more proof. Well, you know, if you go to the doctor and the doctor says you have cancer and you say, I need more proof, that you're screwing with your own life. You know, and what you've done is, not you, but what your predecessors did was they screwed with our future. And look at where we are now. We're dealing with fires out west, record heat, water issues. I can't think of any meaningful problems that the legislature has solved in the last 20 to 30 years. None. And in the last 20 to 30 years, our national legislature has gone from working across the aisle and coming up with meaningful legislation to now just voting the party line. And I'm sick of it. You know, if you can't go to Congress and recognize that people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and others are ripping this country apart
That's right.
and speak out against them, then I'm with you. I won't vote for you either. When you put your name on a list saying you support a fascist to continue running this country, I won't vote for it. I'm a centrist, okay? I'm a McCain Republican. And if I don't see people working across the aisle, I won't support you.
Well, first, I want to thank you for your service, because you, as you say, you have earned every benefit that the government has provided, and whether it was your education or your retirement, or you put your life on the line, and we need to encourage more to do that, to step up and serve. There's a lot packaged into what you've said, and a lot of it comes back to the legislature really straying from its core responsibility to address the critical issues facing the nation. And I do think that social media and the modern society we live in, I don't know if you would agree, what over the last 20 to 30 years has contributed to the division that we see, but I think it has.
Well, let me point out, what's destructive about social media is prior to Facebook and the proliferation of social media, a nut couldn't get their word out any further than going down to the gazebo in town and standing on a soapbox and screaming at people as they walk by. So they might influence 10 people in a day. But now that same nut can get on social media and 5 million people hear it. And it's gotten to the point where people come up to me and they say, you know what I heard? And the first thing I say is, where did you hear it? Are you sure that it's accurate? What are the facts? Because everybody's heard something. And it proliferates to the point where people are listening to rumors in this country and they assume they're fact. And they're not. Social media is killing this country.
That's why we look to you to lead.
By the way, also, every IT person that I know, and I know a number of them, every one of them says they would never have anything to do with Facebook. And I always, again, I look at people that know what they're talking about, and I follow their lead.
I do think that we can't just give up, throw our hands up and say it's social media. We have to actually try and engage and try and solve the problems with social media doing what it does to make things more divisive. And so I do try and lead by example. I don't go on the floor of the House or out to the Triangle, which is where we have our press conferences, and light my hair on fire and try and stir it up. I try and speak to the issues passionately at times, but always with a mind for trying to solve the problem rather than just contribute to the division. But we are a divided country. This is the first time we've had two sessions of Congress where the margins were as slim as they are. So we do have a divided country, and we have to speak to the issues in a way that doesn't exacerbate the divisions, but instead tries to reduce them. And so when I prioritize, I'm trying to prioritize my agenda around things that are brought to me by my constituents, but also that can bring us together. And I spoke to you about veterans issues. Veterans issues are issues where there are no R&D, there is no red or blue. There are solutions, and we need to work together to get there. The PACT Act, which addresses respiratory ailments from burn pits, is an area where both sides came together. Not in the ultimate way that, I wouldn't have written the bill that way myself, but worked hard to get some language included related to rural health care for veterans, and it was included, and so and for that reason, and for many others, I voted for the bill. But veterans issues are very important to me. Transportation issues, core transportation issues, roads, bridges, don't have R's or D's, don't have lanes for R's or D's. Those are core issues. And so I would like to redirect and focus funding that goes to the broader pot of infrastructure towards core roads and bridges, because we are the 81 district. It is the economic backbone. We have businesses up and down 81 that, depending on how we address it, will leave. So we can't just jack up tolls on it, or you'll have a bunch of distributors gone. But we can find ways to have users of the highway more involved in the improvement of the highway.
When you bring up highways, that's one of the things I've noticed now is we used to provide services in a classless way. Okay, but every time I hear about a public-private partnership, I get anxious. It's because what they're doing now is they just opened up the new lanes on 66. Okay. But those new lanes aren't for me. They're for somebody that makes a lot more money than I do. Okay, and the idea, and again, tolls. When they built the toll road in Virginia, the toll road, what they said was there was going to be a toll for the road until the road was paid for.
Right.
And once the road was paid for, the tolls would go away. Okay, well, how am I supposed to believe you when government has a track record of saying, trust me, this is what we're going to do? And when it first started, the toll was $0.25. What is it now?
Don't trust me.
I don't trust you.
me. Hold me accountable. Hold me accountable.
But the point is, you start looking around now where they're expanding the roads. They're not expanding the roads or alleviating the problems for middle-class Americans. They're alleviating the problems for the wealthy. When I drive into town and I see it's going to cost me $16 to go from Route 50 in Fairfax over to Springfield,
Yeah.
that's ridiculous.
Yeah, there's still a toll road in Richmond that I used every time I would go to Richmond, and we were told when it's done, they'll stop the toll, and it's 20, 30 years old, and it's still assessing that same toll. And
What they're doing is they've now created a class society. Okay, anytime they do these public-private partnerships, then you're not just building the road. Now you've got shareholders that want value out of that, and so you have to feed the beast.
well, you're the shareholders of the government, so you deserve to benefit from the government and its actions. That whatever the road, the solution for 81 is, it should benefit everybody, and it may not be that it's directly benefiting everybody, but it's tangentially benefiting everybody through increased jobs, increased economic performance, but also a community that's more tightly knit together. Because I talk to people in my community who won't get on 81. I don't know about up here at Warren, but back home,
I fully agree.
People
Right.
will take 11 to try and get where they need to go. And that's taking a resource that should be under the ownership of everybody in this room and just giving it to the businesses trafficking on it with tractor trailers, or the tourists coming through from other states, but not us. And we deserve to benefit from it too. So I'm trying to work, and that's another issue that is a state issue. But it's a combined partnership between the federal and the state, not private-public, but federal-state. So your delegates and senators are trying to come up with solutions. They've set aside revenues in a special fund to help improve 81, but it's not providing enough. It's pennies to dollars when compared to Northern Virginia. Northern Virginia has dollars that they've locked in place for Northern Virginia, and that's why you see these great flyovers, these exit ramps and things that are just growing like by leaps and bounds, and we don't see, we can't see an exit ramp lengthened just because we don't see enough dollars coming in this part of the state. So, but it is an issue that I am focused on having conversations on. I just had the former mayor of New Orleans, who is overseeing the infrastructure spending, on a conference call with the problem solvers. And I talked specifically about the fact that they were prioritizing projects that were improving existing lanes and putting at the back of the list adding extra lanes. So adding that third lane to 81, which I'm trying to do, is behind a bunch of spot improvements to roads around the country to existing highways. And I questioned him on it, and he said that he would get back to us. But those are priorities for me. So I don't want to monopolize the time for this, but this is an important topic, and I appreciate you bringing it up. And my office is always open, and I'm willing to continue the conversation. So if you don't get to ask your question today, I will meet with anybody who's a constituent. Doesn't matter whether you agree with me, disagree with me, and you may not, feel like a one-on-one is your choice for a venue, but it's where you will get me and my uninvited attention. My staff is here more often than I am because they are local, and I'm back and forth and covering these 21 cities and counties. But I can make time whenever you need me to, because I'm through here at the very least twice a week on the way to and from DC, so I can stop and have a conversation. All right, let me think, because I want to make sure I get. Did I tell you you would go next? Okay, and then we'll go to the back of the green. Oh, identical again.
Hello, my name is Kevin McCafferty. I live here in Front Royal. I too am a former military man, 6 years as a Marine, several years working in corrections, so I guess that would kind of qualify me as a law enforcement type of a person. But my first question is, in your opening statement, you were saying about drilling for oil, for fuel. Now, you mentioned that this administration needs to issue more permits for federal land. Now, first question is, why does it have to be federal land? And the second question is, why don't the oil companies drill with the permits that they already have? And the third question is, why did you vote against capping the profits that oil companies are making, because they are making record profits and not passing it on to the consumers? It's keeping the gas oil, fuel oil, diesel prices high, as well as fertilizers, plastics, anything else that they make with petroleum. So that's my questions.
So the leases that are approved are part of a long-term process for oil companies to explore and find and remove oil. So not every lease results in a productive well. So they need lots of different options. They need to be pursuing lots of different avenues for exploration. What we have is, and this comes back to pricing, it comes back to whether it's on federal land or private land. The oil companies are private companies, and they are trying to make decisions not just on a month-to-month schedule, but and not just on a year-to-year schedule, but on a 10-year plan. And so when they're told by this president and this administration that they want to get rid of fossil fuels, that they want to eliminate drilling, that they want to, then they have to use the resources that they have, plan for the future.
Why aren't they using the resources that they have? Why aren't they drilling with the 9,000 permits that they have?
Because they are,
Profitable. You see, and pardon me for jumping in, because my question to you was, the last time we met, which was up in
tell me your name.
Bob Hill, up in Winchester.
Are you from Winchester?
I'm actually from Front Royal.
Oh, good.
However, I'm originally from New England, and we have that bridge that we've been paying for years that has the Sutler Tunnel and the Mystic River Bridge. They were built by the state, and the state said, hey, guess what? When you pay for it, it'll be free.
Sir?
I think that
I-
answer my question.
But if you might,
I am. Don't worry.
you voted against the cap bill, which was to provide funds for
Because price
making
controls
chips.
don't work long-term. Because price controls don't work long-term.
A number of years ago, the Wall Street Journal had an article about the fact that many of our
Don't worry, I'm coming
corporations,
back to
many of our corporations wanted the federal government to start funding projects, R&D research, because apparently their profits weren't large enough to do it. We have tax benefits that we give to corporations.
you. Tell me your question, because you came late and you're jumping in front.
Fundamentally, the question is, you voted against the cap bill to bring chips into the United States manufacturing. I'd like to know the reason behind that.
Okay, I'm going to answer that question later, because this gentleman has the question and the floor.
But I think fundamentally, they're similar.
Let this gentleman answer,
Yep.
please.
Well, he does. I appreciate the question, and I appreciate everybody's questions, but we got to have a format. We got to have a process. And so, as I said, so not being in the oil industry, I'm not going to guess the decisions that are being made by these companies in their boardrooms about how to address the needs today versus the needs 10 years from now to survive and operate as a private company. But my understanding is that they need more options in terms of federal land. And when you look
Why
at,
does it have to be federal land?
because the resource is controlled by the federal government, most of the land in the West is owned by the federal government. The state of Nevada is at least 75% federally owned. So I'm just giving that as an example. It's different than it is here. And so the federal permission, Alaska is another example of a state that is heavily under federal control and ownership. So the federal leases are necessary to access that oil. And we're not doing enough as a federal government to to encourage that. We all benefit, as I was trying to explain, from lower energy costs. These companies could, I suppose, operate on a nonprofit basis.
Well, it's not a nonprofit. They've been making record profits. They've been making billions and billions and billions of dollars.
Mhm.
Well, I don't know whether to put gas in my car or to eat a box of Kraft macaroni and cheese. Do you see what I mean? They don't have to make record profits like they have been making for the last year and a half. If they would go back to the same profits they were making a year and a half ago, our gas would be the price it was a year and a half ago.
If they made no investment for the future and returned all the profits to current pricing, then you would have lower prices. But we hope that our energy prices will be low in 10 years, and that requires an investment on the part of the private sector, on the part of these companies.
Why weren't they preparing for what was happening today?
Well, they didn't have a president telling them that they wanted to get rid of fossil fuels.
They've had presidents and they've had people in the political world telling them for years, you need to raise your mileage, get rid of emissions, do all these things, that they would have to prepare for the future. And, you know, that was 10 years ago. You were talking about preparing for the future. Why weren't they preparing 10 years ago?
Because the future that they're being told to prepare for is a future without them existing. And that is...
So they want to get fat now, and isn't that capitalism? I mean, you know...
I would love for prices to be lower.
Capitalism's a double-edged sword, you know?
But I...
Excuse me, but if you would like prices to be lower,
Yeah.
then one of the things you can do as a legislator is require that oil companies that sell their products in this company create an infrastructure that supports that. So for instance, every spring, what we get is gas prices are going up because they have to shut refineries down to maintain them. Okay, then excuse me, but your private company, you want to sell me a product? Build enough refineries.
And that has to be a partnership with the federal government, and they're not being
They should be
accommodated.
Petroleum products in this country are a necessity for the average citizen.
I agree.
Well, if that's the case, then treat it like electricity and natural gas and make it a utility. Make it a utility, regulate it, and if they don't like it, no.
And the same with healthcare.
You know, because let me tell you that no company is going to walk out on a profitable product. Okay, but we don't regulate it enough. We don't tell these companies enough what they have to do. So as a result, they're free and unfettered to do whatever they want, and they're doing it with leases from federal land, that's our land, that's our oil. They're
And-
sucking it out of the ground, and they're charging whatever the hell they want for it.
And their taxes get cut. Because
Right,
they're-
right, so if they want to buy the land and then suck the gas out, okay. But if they want to do it with a lease on federal land, then the federal government should have the right to say that if, when you take this oil out, this is what you charge for it.
And the view of the federal government is that we should be in a partnership with these companies when they operate on federal lands. And that's what the last administration did, and that's why gas prices were so low. Because there was a partnership, not an adversarial relationship like the one we have now. So I would like to return to that partnership and see lower prices, but I agree, we need to see some effort on the part of the oil companies to bring down prices, but it's also on the responsibility of the federal government to give those companies some certainty when it comes to long-term planning, so that they can make those decisions and bring down the costs.
The federal government still needs to take more action. Just like, I'll tell you, one of the things that we're facing right now is helium. Okay, we're running out of helium. You know that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we're running out of helium, and what many people don't understand is when you go to the doctor for an MRI, you can't get that MRI without helium, because there are magnets that have to be super cool in order to get the imaging, and the only thing that can do that is helium. And even though we're facing a shortage, the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade blew up those balloons and wasted hundreds of thousands of cubic feet of helium. And when you go, if you go to Martin's today and you want to get somebody a happy birthday balloon that floats in the air, you can still do that. But next week, when you go for an MRI, they might look at you and say, sorry, out of helium. It's your job to get involved and say, okay, we got to put the brakes on helium.
Enough is enough.
Yeah, no more ornamental use of helium.
Or look at projects like,
Otherwise, if you all don't do your job, then we're all going to suffer.
And
That's-
I guess in a nutshell is, do you work for us or do you work for ExxonMobil? That's what I want to know.
And that's exactly why I'm here and why I'm advocating solutions that are going to benefit.
I haven't seen
All of
any
you.
solutions
Okay.
from you. All I see is you pointing your finger.
Yes, sir.
Doug Boyle, Warren County. And I think maybe to answer this question, you might provide some solutions we're looking for.
Speak
Yeah,
up,
you-
please, sir.
Huh?
Please speak up.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Doug Boyle, Warren County. Energy question. You talked earlier about nuclear energy, and now you're on appropriations, correct? How, in your role on the appropriations committee, are you going to be promoting expansion of nuclear energy in the United States? Okay, that's one question.
Okay.
The next question pertains to law enforcement, which we all support and love. They do a great job out there. But in terms of the federal government providing, I think one of the solutions, and we can argue this all day long, is better training for our officers at the local and state level, particularly in conflict resolution. I think they do a
Yes.
tremendous job,
Yes.
and what they face is really incredible every day.
Yes.
But I want to point to the example of the military with this question. Where the military has enough personnel that, and the military I've seen work around the world are tremendous. Okay? The result of training, right?
Yeah.
And the military always has enough personnel in order to provide a certain segment of that personnel to be in training. So the federal government, and I know you don't like to put conditions on money going out to the states, but how in the Appropriations Committee can you use the federal government to provide further funding for training of state and local police forces, particularly in conflict resolution and community outreach?
Very good questions. And we all support our law enforcement, and we want to see that they're well-trained, and the training requirements are different here in Warren County than they are in Richmond City or New York City. And so, again, a lot of that has to do with resources that I have supported going to states, and then the states being able to provide that training as they see fit for their officers. When we dictate a one-size-fits-all solution from Washington, inevitably we're not addressing the problem as effectively or as comprehensively as we should. So when money gets tied up at DOJ, when money gets tied up at the federal level, that's a problem. So one of the things that I've done on the Appropriations Committee is tried to either block grant or send money out that is not tied up in the hands of DOJ. I've also tried to encourage the development of nuclear energy, again, through the public-private solutions that don't have government running, especially the research that is needed to be done. I mean, we have facilities right here in Virginia that are researching small nuclear reactors. I mean, and they're the ones that make the big nuclear reactors that power submarines and military vessels that are leading the way in the research into small what you call micro reactors. And the ones that our governor has identified are just now being, they haven't even, a lot of these discoveries are 2-3 years away, 5 years away, but recognize that the investment needs to be made now to try and get to those solutions. And so making sure that we can invest in those facilities is definitely something that I'm supporting on the Appropriations Committee. So, and I think that's where the governor got his idea. I think he was touring some of these facilities in Virginia. They've shown him exactly what kind of technology they're working on, and it's impressive stuff. So hopefully we're going to see. All right, we're going to go to the green, and it's going to have to be our last question. We're already 15 minutes over, and then I'll hang on that.
Matthew Myers, and I live here in Warren County, and I'll try to keep this nice and short for you. One thing I was wanting to talk about the gas prices, and everybody's pretty much hit on that, except what I think has been missed is the Congress just voted and told the railroad workers, you don't have a contract, but you will work. We can do the same thing with the gasoline till they get the prices down and make it reasonable, because there used to be a commercial on TV that I really loved, and it said, if it's in your home, a truck brought it, which, just like you said earlier, the fuels drive the economy. Therefore, when the fuels are real high, we pay higher prices for everything across the board. So that should be a national emergency at this point, since our inflation is higher than it's been in 40 years. Therefore, why can't you all go ahead and do just like they did? They said that the railroad people, if they went on strike, what damage it would do to America. And so what did you all do? You jumped in there and you said, hey, you can't strike. This is what you're going to do. And you don't get your health insurance and this and that, but you are going to work. The same thing could happen with the gas companies until things level out and we see our decrease in the inflation. I mean, it can happen. We just saw it happen with the railroads.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to mention that's really important that nobody has mentioned about is in January, the prices on insulin are capped to where nobody has to pay any more than $35 a month for their insulin. But I don't understand why just insulin. I take a medication that is to keep me from becoming a diabetic because of a medical problem. That medicine is $2,000 a month.
Oh my God.
If I didn't have insurance, I couldn't afford it. I just get to die. But I have insurance, but it has gone in the last 2 years, it has gone from $47 a month for that to now it's up to $97. And I'm assuming it's probably going to go up at the first of the year. So why are we just going to cap one? I mean, there's a lot of Americans. I mean, I'm not that old. I'm 65. I had to retire early because of my health. So I'm not even drawing my Social Security yet. But that's a big thing, and I'm really concerned where it's going to go from there, because if I have to use all my savings and my pension to buy this medicine, I just as well die. So I'm not going to have anything anyway. So I don't understand why we're just worried about the one medication versus, because the pharmaceutical companies are just like the oil companies. They're making record profits. Mm-hmm. Profits mean that is money beyond all expenses. That's what profit is. And small businesses here in town, when they don't make enough profit, they go out of business. They don't get supported and uplifted. They have to deal with it. So we need to make some of these bigger corporations live like small businesses, and I think we see a real change in what we're doing, especially in the gas. Because if you can do it for the railroads and force them into something that those employees don't want, you can do it for the gas companies too. There's just no way that you can't. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate it, and glad that you have the insurance that's able to help you, and we want to make sure that more people get covered and make sure that that insurance marketplace is as vibrant as other sectors of the economy. What you have right now is too many insurers covering too little, jacking up prices, and that's directly a result of Obamacare. The result of
Excuse me, no, I have to stop you right there.
Okay, well, you can disagree, but I get to.
In the early 70s, or I should say prior to the early 70s, all of the major health insurers were nonprofits. Okay, and in the early 70s, they went to Congress and they said, we'd like to be for-profit companies. And since then, this thing has just blown out of proportion. Okay, we had good health care. Say again?
When Obamacare was passed.
You can't blame this on Obama.
Oh, most certainly. The number of insurance companies that went out of business, the number of insurers that stopped covering individuals, what happened to the biggest lie of 2010? If you like your health insurer, you can keep it. If you like your doctor, you can keep it. That was proven to be the biggest lie of the year by Obama because the Obamacare mandated so much on insurance companies that they stopped covering a whole host of things, forced everybody onto Medicaid.
That's because they're for-profit companies.
Well,
okay, they stopped offering that because they weren't making enough money.
those decisions.
Because they've got stockholders that they have to satisfy with profit. And they're doing it on our backs. And it's affecting, this is an older crowd here. Okay, I'm sure many people can remember when healthcare didn't have these costs.
No.
You know, you had health insurance, you went to the hospital, they took care of you. Now, you have health insurance, you go to the hospital, and they start taking care of you, and then they say, oh, you know, if you stay here another 10 minutes, it's going to cost you $10,000. I'm sorry, but you go back to the early 70s.
You can disagree, and
You go back to the early 70s.
look at what happened with the insurance markets. What happened with the energy, the more the government controls, okay, all right. The more the government controls any segment of the economy, whether it's drug pricing, health insurance, energy costs, you name it, you're going to limit competition, you're going to limit innovation, you're going to artificially drive up costs, and you're going to ultimately hurt the consumer. It's basic economics, and that's my policy, my principles.
This gentleman just said it.
I got you. Okay, I'm going to have to wrap it up, sir. Would you like to?
Obamacare was. You talk about how bad Obamacare was.
Yes.
Okay, I followed that, the whole thing. Obama had to beat the legislature into accepting something, okay? And it was a battle all the way. But what did you just say?
I'm still waiting on Paul Ryan's better plan that he put out. He said, and then Trump.
You talk about how bad Obamacare is. You
Thank you all very
guys
much.
had zero. You had nothing to offer.
I was elected in 2018, and I'm happy to hear your complaints about the Congress before 2018. But I'm also happy to talk to you about moving forward solutions that bring people together. So I'm happy to hang out afterward and talk to you about that. But for the purpose of the town hall meeting, we're going to stop now because we're 25 minutes over. And don't worry, I'll be back, and I'm sure you all will be there. I'm sure you'll be on my social media pages contributing. So I appreciate you. I will be, January 3rd, I can start using my official funds in Winchester. So that's when I'll be there.
Well, you asked earlier.
Yeah, you being there, or is that, or sending?
That's when we're going to hopefully have an office open, but that's our goal.
But you asked earlier if Winchester would be more convenient for
Yes.
Front Royal
Yes.
than Harrisburg. Winchester's only 20 miles away.
Okay.
You know, Harrisburg's an hour and a half.
I appreciate that input very much. All right, thank you all very much.